York City has the largest police force in the United States. It's also considered on the cutting edge when it comes to tactics and procedures. A new book called Blue on Blue talks about how the NYPD polices its own. The author is Charles Campisi, the man who ran the Internal Affairs Bureau for nearly a decade. He provides an inside account of what really goes down and how good cops catch bad cops. Charles, most people's image of internal affairs comes from TV and movies where cops tend to treat internal affairs the way criminals treat cops. They stay away from them, they don't deal with them, they don't tell them anything. How accurate is that, and how difficult does that make it to police the police?
You're absolutely right. That is the perception, and the perception is fueled by what we see in movies and television. That is fairly accurate. Most police officers, although they understand the need for internal affairs, although in the cases of very serious misconduct and corruption will cooperate, their general perception is that internal affairs should be separate, be on its side, and when we need them, we'll call them. Now that makes it very difficult not only to recruit people into the Internal Affairs Bureau, but also to do your job properly, because people are not as forthcoming. Officers, even civilians, are not as forthcoming to provide the information that you need to do a complete and comprehensive investigation.
You know the term blue wall of silence, the sense that cops just aren't going to rat each other out. But for every police-involved incident that we see, every bad cop that we see caught on video somewhere, there's a sense that there must be 10, 20 cops who at least know of that person's behavior and haven't done anything to stop it. Is that an accurate perception?
Well, you see, the blue wall of silence is something that's real. But my question would be, why do people believe that the wall of silence only exists in the law enforcement profession? We find it in all professions throughout the country, throughout the world. We've seen instances where, in the medical profession, where doctors have made mistakes, have done things wrong, and other medical professionals have not come forward to provide that information. We've seen it in the fire department. We've seen it in the legal profession. We've seen it everywhere, especially in those places where people rely on each other for their well-being and safety. But to say a blue wall of silence, yes, it does exist. But to think that it's only exclusive to law enforcement, that's a mistake. It's everywhere in all professions.
No, of course, but police officers are sworn to uphold the law and to prosecute people who break the law and violate the law. Ostensibly, that would include people in their own ranks. So there is a bit of a difference between the blue wall of silence and that similar phenomenon in other fields.
Well, what we find is, and what we did in the New York City Police Department, is we established a confidential phone line. We changed our rules and procedures that would allow officers to report corruption and misconduct anonymously, provide information, but not provide their name. And over the years, we've seen a large increase in the number of those types of calls, those types of officers coming forward to provide information. And when we look at our most egregious cases, we find that it was officers coming forward, providing information, providing testimony in those cases where it was appropriate, that helped the investigation go forward.
We've also seen technology just absolutely explode in relation to this. And so we see a lot of, first of all, body cameras being rolled out on officers now, including in New York City, surveillance cameras, and of course, cell phone videos. How much easier is that making it for internal affairs to go after bad cops?
Well, it's making it much easier because there's video just about everywhere. If you're in a public place, especially here in New York City, you should expect to be on some sort of video camera. And the officers wearing body cameras is the next logical step. And I'm a big fan of the cameras on the officers because we put cameras in some of our police cars a number of years ago. And what those cameras shown, that officers, for the most part, do their job properly and effectively. There is that small number that will violate our rules, will violate the law. And hopefully, having the body cameras, having all those cameras around will do one of two things. Either deter those who might want to commit a crime or might want to do something wrong, and it would also help those officers who do nothing wrong, who do their job properly.
And yet in so many high-profile cases where there is video, we often find that police officers are acquitted or not prosecuted or penalized in the way that a lot of people would tend to expect. When you see video of cases like those, are you seeing something different than the general public at large? Or are you seeing police behavior that's more explainable for somebody who's experienced and on the inside than for somebody who's just seeing the video as an outsider?
Well, one of the things you have to look at is you need to see the entire video. You need to see the series of events that precipitated the actual incident itself and what happened afterwards. Many times, especially what we see in the media, is just a small snippet, something that just shows the maybe the very end of an incident. So we need to see all of those incidents, and then they have to be judged in the light of how they occurred. What are the surrounding circumstances? What are the events and circumstances that led up to the incident, and what the officer actually did or failed to do?
Finally, Charles, you had a long career with the NYPD, a lot of it in internal affairs. Are cops today better cops, better behaved cops than they were years ago? And if so, why is that? Is that because we're getting better cops just through the system or because of the efforts of internal affairs?
Well, I think it's a combination of all of those things. You got to remember, if we go back to the era of Frank Serpico, where we had systemic corruption, corruption flowed throughout the agencies, and it wasn't just here in New York. It was in just about every big city in the nation. And corruption was part of it was endemic to the police culture. Slowly but surely, from that time on, corruption has been curtailed. Officers are better trained. Officers are better supervised. We do an awful lot to select officers, and I'd have to admit, sometimes officers get by all of our screening, and we get someone who perhaps should never have been a police officer in the first place. But we work very hard on screening those officers out. So it's a real combination. Internal affairs being proactive, being vigilant, deters those people who would think about committing a crime, catches those people who believe that they can get away with it, and it also helps train the officers on what to look for. What are the pitfalls of corruption? What to stay away from? How to protect yourself? How to protect the city?
Charles Campisi, the former chief of internal affairs for the NYPD and the author of Blue on Blue, an insider story of good cops catching bad cops. Thank you so much for the time, and hopefully this is a conversation we can continue down the road.
Oh, absolutely. It'd be my pleasure, and thank you so much for having me.
We'll take a quick break. When we come back, your Hudson Valley Headlines.